All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get started. Continue to use the chat to say hi to your fellow backfighters here. Thank you so much for joining us today. Exciting news, and maybe you have a piece of cake or a sweet treat or a fruit, whatever floats your boat with you. But today is our actual birth date. The Partnership for Food Safety Education was created on May 12th. So welcome to this 25th anniversary celebration webinar, Back to Basics. Next slide, please. I have the pleasure of introducing myself. I am Britanny Saunier. I am the Executive Director of the Partnership for Food Safety Education. And please feel free to reach out to me at any moment for resources. My email's here. I'm happy to help you. So thank you for joining us. Next slide. And to give you a sense of what to expect today, you'll hear from me, a little bit of housekeeping. We'll also hear from our Vice Chair of the Board, Harold Chase, and he'll provide you with a little bit of the partnership's history. I will share, following Harold Chase, I will share some history behind the development of the core 4 messages, clean, separate, cook, and chill. And we're very pleased today to have with us Amy Lando with the FDA to share with you the latest results of the Food Safety Nutrition Survey that the FDA conducted. Very interesting information I think you will enjoy for your program development. And then also we'll go over some resources that the partnership has recently developed, including a new tool for kids, some coloring pages, and where you can go to get some of these resources and how you can use them. Next slide, please. Excuse me, someone's revving their car outside. I don't know if you can hear it. So housekeeping, you've already seen that there's lots of activity in the chat. Please join the chat, share a question. You can also use the Q&A function. I do encourage you, if you have a specific question, to please use that Q&A box. But we'll monitor the chat and try to float those over. After this webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. Please complete it. It really does help us continue to provide quality programming for you. So please take that time. It's really, really quick. And thank you for that. Next slide. Oh, yes. And the star of the show, I know many of the questions already in the Q&A box are about this. You, in the chat box, you can access the continuing education unit certificates. It'll also be in a follow-up email to you, likely tomorrow. We'll list them under the free resources tab on fightback.org. And just a special note for those of you seeking the NCHEC units, there is an online questionnaire that must be completed by July 7th to receive those. And all of that information is in this chat box and will be in follow-up emails. Next slide. So about the Partnership for Food Safety Education, we are an active network and you are part of that network. So thank you so much for being on our team. There's about 13,000 of you across the United States, as you can see demonstrated in the chat box today. We collaborate with about 40 organizations representing food industry, consumer groups, scientific associations, as well as our federal liaison partners. And we all do this together collectively to advance food safety education. And especially today on our birth date, I'd like to encourage you to not think of the Partnership for Food Safety Education as one organization. I'd like you to think about the Partnership for Food Safety Education as the name to this unique joint effort that we are all participating in to prevent foodborne illness. It takes everyone to raise awareness, and we're so thankful to have you on this team. Next slide. And I'm sure some of these statistics on foodborne illness rates are likely not a surprise to many of you here today. The CDC estimates about 48 million people will get sick from foodborne illness. Many will be hospitalized. Too many will die from foodborne illness. And I wanted to highlight this to show that there's a lot of work that needs to be done yet to prevent foodborne illnesses, and following the core 4 messages at home while preparing meals is one of the key ways to prevent these illnesses. Next slide. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our Vice Chair of the Board, Harold Chase. He's Director of Legislative and Regulatory Affairs at NSF International. And we've been working collaboratively with folks like Harold and NSF for the past 25 years to prevent foodborne illness. And to share a little bit more about that historical collaboration of this collective, Harold Chase.
Thank you, Britt. Really appreciate that introduction. And thank you for everyone who's been able to attend this webinar. I see right now 311 people. It's just fantastic. Thank you so much for taking part of your day to join us as we celebrate 25 years, as Britt just indicated. It just seems crazy to me that it's been that much, and we've accomplished so much during that time. So just, way of background for those who aren't aware, that the partnership was created in the 90s as a response to a foodborne illness outbreak. There were several actions that took place in response to that. Some changes were made to how meat processing is done and applying HACCP principles. But then as well, the federal agencies really thought, and the Clinton administration at the time thought it was important that consumers be more involved and educated on how to protect themselves against foodborne illness. So there was a memorandum of understanding signed between the FDA, the USDA, and the CDC and others between those agencies and the Partnership for Food Safety Education. And I'm going to quote, "To provide a framework for cooperation among the parties as each develops science-based, consumer-oriented messages to promote safe food handling practices," unquote. And so as you can see, right into our foundation, this is all about providing science-based messaging and consumer-oriented messages to consumers. The partnership itself, as Britt had gone through, is comprised of food industry groups, state association, consumer organizations, and others interested in promoting safe food handling behavior to prevent foodborne illness. Some of the original founding organizations who signed that MOU have remained partners all these years. I'll just list a few. The Food Marketing Institute has been there since day one. The Association of Food and Drug Officials, and the Consumer Federation of America. As you can tell, this is a diverse group. This is not just the food industry. It's not just consumer organizations. It's not just educators. It is everybody working together. Since its founding, the partnership has worked with thousands of educators across the country. I think I saw 13,000 on the slide there from Britanny earlier. And we are, helping, provide materials and support to allow the educators to connect directly with consumers across the country. The partnership is proud to hold a biennial Consumer Food Safety Education Conference. This started just a few years after the founding of the partnership. My company was actually very instrumental in those early years, and now the organizing of that conference is done through the partnership. And if you've not had a chance to attend one of these conferences, I would highly recommend you do so. It's just a phenomenal place for everyone to get together, learn about what's happening in food safety education, current trends, and how you can best market that and get that message of core principles across to consumers. The need for consumer food safety education is important now as it was 25 years ago. I mean, perhaps even more so. The pandemic we've lived with over the past 2 years accelerated some trends in how consumers interact with food. And it also forced many, at least temporarily, to cook more at home than they had been in the past. So this highlights, for example, the need for the Safe Recipe Style Guide, building in prompts into recipes, wash your hands, separate out your stuff, cook, use a thermometer, wherever that prompt is necessary. That's the Safe Recipe Style Guide helps do that. It places those food safety prompts into the recipes. The pandemic also saw a dramatic increase in the use of online food delivery services, anything from groceries to meal kits and prepared foods. In response to that, the partnership has launched the Prep Yourself Food is on the Way campaign to educate and help provide these materials to educate consumers as to what they can do to keep themselves safe. So I look forward to the next 25 years and all the work that everyone who was involved in this partnership, the consumer groups, the food and drug officials, the food industry, and most importantly, in my mind, the BAC fighters, as we call them, the educators who are on the ground doing this work, communicating these messages and connecting directly with consumers. On behalf of the Partnership for Food Safety Education Board of Directors, I would just like to extend a special thank you to everyone who's been involved for 25 years, especially our BAC fighters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harold. And I want to echo that as well. I saw in the chat some congratulations coming through. Yes, thank you. And please, I hope we are congratulating you. You have been part of this 25 years. You are the ones on the ground advancing this message, and it wouldn't have been made possible without you. So thank you so much. I hope you feel proud. So let's get into it. I believe we have a poll question for you, a little fun pop quiz. Wanted to see here. What are the core 4 food safety practices? I have a feeling that you will ace this, but let's see. See if you can identify. Okay, we'll leave this open until we start to see the response rate trickle down. I also want to make a shout out while we're doing this. I saw someone is logging in from Hawaii. Wow, thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and share the results. Great, 98%. No, that is clean, separate, cook, and chill. Well done. The 2%, don't feel bad. I mean, you have these steps highlighted within the core 4 messages. So I would give that a 100% response rate. Thank you for doing that. That was a little fun that we could have. Great. So about the core 4, we wanted to talk to you about the core 4 today because this is a Back to Basics webinar. As you know, because you signed up. And I am a firm believer myself in revisiting the origins and initial intentions of an effort to make sure that we're staying focused against our goal. So what better time in a 25th year anniversary to really look at our goal, which is to reduce foodborne illness, and the essential tools that are behind that. And the core 4 are the basis for all consumer food handling messages. So that's why we're starting here. As you likely already know, since there were a pretty high response rate there, the core 4 messages are clean, separate, cook, and chill. And they reflect essential steps such as hand washing, the importance of rinsing your produce underwater, cleaning your surfaces before you begin your meal prep, that type of action. Separate typically highlights opportunities to prevent cross-contamination. Cook is heating to a safe internal temperature, and chill is all about storage and temperature control of that storage. Refrigeration, chilling, refrigeration and frozen. As I mentioned, these core 4 messages are the essential messages that are basis for all consumer food handling guidance. And they were developed with consistency in mind to eliminate any possibility of confusion for the household. So at the time of our formation, the partnership's formation, there were guidance in place to the household on how to handle food safely, but it was different language across the board and varied by organization. So the partnership's formation prioritize creating consistent messaging that would be used by all types of organizations to reduce any confusion and provide clear guidance to the household. And they were also developed through that cross-sector collaboration that Harold highlighted for you to ensure that there was buy-in and uptake as well. They were created through a scientific review, so they have a basis in science. And they were also created with the most critical points of control. As you all know, there are so many areas to prevent and reduce risk when it comes to handling of food. However, it's very challenging to communicate all those different areas of risk. So the Core 4 was developed to just highlight the most important steps. If they were the only steps someone took, they were doing a great job at reducing the risk of illness. Additionally, they were developed alongside the Fight Back campaign, which I know many of you are very familiar with, the little green germ dude, and in 1998. And those campaigns and these messages went through a focus group testing to determine whether or not the messages would be received well by the end user, in this case, consumers, people at home handling food, if they made sense and they were clear. One little thing I want to point out, as I was doing a historical dive on the development of the Core 4 that I found interesting, there was an example of how some of that messaging was impacted by the results of that focus group. So at one point, separate was considered a potential phrasing as control it. But through the testing phase of the Core 4 messages, it was revealed that control it seemed confusing to people. And this is just an example. And it brought up many ideas to people and wasn't clear enough about just how to prevent cross-contamination. So through that iterative process, separate became the final element of the Core 4 instead of using control it. So I wanted to share that as a little snippet of some of that process. I believe this has been published at some point. You should be able to find those studies. And I do want to mention, and some of you may be aware, that currently the Core 4, the scientific basis behind the Core 4 as they are now, has been reviewed through a panel of academics in 2021. Those recommendations from that panel were announced at our 2021 conference last year, virtual conference. And we are still in the process of that review. And this summer, we will kick off a communications review of those recommendations to see how those messages should be positioned in a consumer-friendly format, if at all. Spoiler alert, not much has changed. And there were just a few little minor tweaks. And we will, when we have that ready to share, we will most certainly bring that to your attention. So that's a little bit about the Core 4. I know many of you have likely been involved in this process for some time and are very aware of it. So thank you so much. Next slide, please. So now I have the great pleasure of introducing Amy Lando to you. She will be sharing with you the FDA's Food Safety and Nutrition Survey results, social scientist at the FDA. And one of the reasons why we're very excited to have you with us today, Amy, is I believe these findings are really helpful in understanding how people are handling food and can help inform some of your program development and strategies for reaching people in your community. So Amy, thank you. I will hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Brittany. It's really a big honor to be presenting today. So thank you so much for the invitation. So yeah, today I wanted to talk to everyone a little bit about our food safety and nutrition survey and then share some of our results. And again, I'm Amy Lando. I'm with the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition at FDA. I'm a social scientist. And so next slide, please. So very briefly, of course, this project wasn't mine alone. I had a wonderful team, and it was a total team effort. And just on the slide, you can see my picture from a few years ago, and then 3 of my colleagues who worked very hard on it, Linda Verrill, Fan Wu, and Martine Ferguson. So I wanted to highlight them as well for this work. Next slide, please. You can go ahead and put all the, yes. So thank you. Yes, so a little bit of background, just like this is the 25th anniversary of the partnership, the FSANS has a long history as well. We don't have to go into too much of the detail, but basically FDA has been conducting consumer surveys since the 1980s. We used to conduct a food safety survey, and that was since 1988, and a health and diet survey since 1982, and they were separate surveys. And you can see on the note below, they were phone surveys, because back in the 80s and 90s, you really could reach people by calling them up on a landline, which certainly is not the case very easily today. So we had these wonderful surveys, and we still have our data and have published extensively from it. And we conducted the surveys. They were repeated cross-sectional surveys every 3 to 5 years. But prior to conducting this new survey, we realized that continuing to do phone surveys, even including cell phones, really wasn't getting us the response rate we had hoped for. And we really needed to change methodologies to stay up to date, to get really great, national estimates on what consumers are doing in their homes. And so we made a lot of modifications. We combined the 2 topics. And so now you can see the arrow going to the right. We have a food safety and nutrition survey, FSANS. And we changed methodology to really be an address-based web and paper survey. So we actually reached people through the mail, the snail mail. We contacted people. We were able to get a random, probability of households, and we sent them letters encouraging them to participate. We encouraged them to take the survey online. So there was a link, and you had a code. You can go online to take the survey. And for people who, of course, didn't have computers or smartphones or a way to take it online, we had multiple contacts, and by the 4th contact, we sent them a paper version, which they could mail back. So you did not need to have a computer to be online to take the survey, but we did encourage that possibility. We also conducted a small phone, that's the RDD is the phone comparison, so that we would be able to see what changes to responses were the effect of the change in sampling and methodology. Again, going from a phone where you have an interviewer assisting in the survey to a paper or pencil or online survey where the respondent has to read the question and respond alone without an interviewer assisting. So next slide, please. So just this slide has a lot of information, but just wanted to highlight all of the different topics that we were able to include on this new survey. And you can see we broke it down across the left-hand side, into the different aspects of food. By people shop for food, they prepare food, of course, eat food, and store food as well. And so we really thought about the different types of behaviors people engage with in these different ways of interacting with food. So of course, for shopping, we ask questions about the nutrition facts label, about package claims, about organic and GE foods, things that you might think about when you're shopping for food. For preparing, and this is what we'll talk about today, we had food handling questions, how people handle food in their homes, what types of foods they're eating, and a little bit about their cooking ability and frequency, really. We also had questions about restaurant, where they eat, how often they eat food in restaurants, and if they look at menu labeling or health inspection scores or other information at restaurants, as well as information about overall diet, knowledge and practice, knowledge about food safety, a little bit about food allergies, and a few questions about consumption of potentially of raw or undercooked foods. And then finally, for storage, we really have one question on it, but I wanted to put it in there that we have a question about storing food after it's been prepared in the home. So those are all a brief overview of all the topics that we have on the survey. Next slide, please. So as you can see, there's so many topics, so many questions. There are reports available, of course. I think you can see down below. And I'll show you where you can find all of the information about the survey. But for today and for the limited time, I just wanted to share one quick analysis that I thought would be interesting for this group, which is a comparison of pre-COVID and mid-COVID self-reported food handling behaviors using two comparable surveys. So of course, talking about our 2019 FSANS, which was a survey I just covered, and data from 2020, because of course the 2019 data, as great as they were pre-COVID, and the world changed with COVID. And so we were able, through our work with CDC, to get some data that the Porter Novelli false styles data set, and we were able to do a comparison between those two surveys. So let me share with you just a few select results that may be of interest to this group. And I should mention my colleagues there. You saw their names, Martine Ferguson and Yu Cao, who both worked with me. Thank you. So background, again, what prompted us to look at this analysis was the CDC has noted declines in foodborne illnesses during the COVID pandemic. And their FoodNet 2020 preliminary data report, which was released in 2021, said that infections monitored by FoodNet markedly decreased in 2020. And they hypothesized, these are quotes from their report, that the COVID-19 pandemic likely played a role in that decrease. Next slide. So our research question was, have consumer home hygiene practices changed during the COVID-19 pandemic? Next slide. So again, getting a little bit into the analytical approach, and again, thanks to Martine and you for help with the heavy stats lift. But basically, first we identified the two data sets, which again were the 2019 FSANS data, the FDA data, and the 2020 Porter Novelli data. And we had comparable questions, 3 comparable questions on those surveys. So we identified that we could look at those data. We evaluated the 2 data sets for the appropriateness of even making comparisons. We looked at the methods, the samples, demographics, the sampling frames and sampling weights. And even though they were different, we felt comfortable that we could continue to move forward with the analysis. We worked to concatenate the data. We composited the data survey weights, and we ran regression models, ordered logistic models, comparing the data sets while controlling for the demographic differences, age, gender, race, ethnicity, education, and income. And then the results, which I'm going to share today, are the model adjusted probabilities that show the model predicted outcomes by the survey year, or 2019 FSANS compared to the 2020 Porter Novelli. So they're not the raw frequency data. Just want to make that clear. Next slide. And here's a little more detail about the survey methods. So they were very different. You can see in all these different ways you would talk about surveys. For the sampling frame, of course, FSANS used an address-based sampling frame of the US population. Porter Novelli false styles is sampled from a panel, an Ipsos panel. The methods are different. For this presentation, we only looked at the mail push to web survey results, which were our main results from FSANS. Porter Novelli was just online only. The populations were generally the same. Again, we're talking about general population of US adults aged 18 and over. So we don't have any children or teenagers in their sample. Sample size was relatively, similar, 4,000, or 3,600. The time frame, again, this is key. The FSANS survey was conducted right before COVID, so fall of 2019, whereas Porter Novelli data were collected during COVID or mid-COVID. I don't even know what to say anymore. So in 2020. Language, again, English versus in Spanish, English, and you can go on about the different cooperation rates, response rates, which are a little bit different. But let's just get to the results. So again, we had 3 questions that we were looking at. Before you begin preparing food, how often do you wash your hands with soap? And the response options were all of the time, most of the time, some of the time, rarely or never. And the second question was, after handling raw meat or chicken, what do you usually do? And there were response options were continue cooking without washing hands, rinse or wipe hands, wash with soap or something else. And then finally, how often do you wash whole chickens or turkeys before cooking them? And the response options were always, often, sometimes, never, or don't cook whole chickens or turkeys. Next slide, please. So here you can see the results for our first question, and again, these are the model adjusted probabilities. These are not the raw frequencies in the data. But again, before you begin preparing food, how often do you wash your hands with soap? And you could see there was really no difference between the two survey years. 72% in FSANS and 74% in Porter Novelli said all of the time, and then there's no difference. The confidence intervals are shown here, and you can see that they all overlap. So there is no difference between the two data sets. We didn't see any change in hand washing, self-reported hand washing before preparing. Next slide. So then the next question was, after handling raw meat or chicken, what do you usually do? And here we do see some differences. We see that in 2020, respondents were much more likely to say wash hands with soap, 88%, compared to in 2019 FSANS, which was 78%. And I will highlight something down at the bottom, that the fall styles data, the response options were in a slightly different order. And so we do have to consider, possible order effects of the response options and if that played a role, if any, in how consumers responded to the question. Next slide. And here is the same data, except we took out the people who said they never cooked raw meat or chicken, because there was a sizable percent, and this just highlights the difference between the two surveys. Next slide. And then finally, we asked, how often do you wash whole chickens or turkeys before cooking them? And again, you can see that the difference is really in the percent who say they don't cook whole chickens or turkeys, and that increased from 12% to 19% between the two data sets. Nothing else really changed. Next slide. And then finally, when we remove those people and you look at just the people who do cook whole chicken or turkeys, you see that there is no difference across the two data sets. Next slide. So in summary, we found that there was no significant change in hand washing before meal preparation between the two years, but we did see a sizable increase in hand washing after touching the raw chicken or meat or chicken. And then finally, we found that fewer people reported preparing whole chickens and turkeys during the pandemic. And again, we don't know if that has to do with availability, less get-togethers during that holiday season, or other reasons. But of those who do cook, there have been no change in the percent reporting washing their chickens or turkeys before cooking. Next slide. So in our discussion, we did see improved consumer food handling of raw meat or chicken at home, and changes to the percent of consumers who cook certain types of raw meat or chicken. And this may or may not, we don't really know. I put this in quotes because it's really unsure, but it's possible that some of that improvement may have contributed to the decrease in foodborne illness during 2020. But again, we don't really know. And of course, we didn't see a significant change in hand washing before the main meal. So this is a really unsure may. But I think it does show the value of asking the same questions on multiple surveys, tracking trends over time. But of course, the data here were limited by only having 3 measures of consumer home food safety behavior. And of course, I'd be remiss to say that the order of the responses for that hand washing after touching raw meat or chicken, it may have influenced the outcome some. So again, this is really hedging that this should be studied in future surveys, so we know if this effect is real, or if it was something about the way the question wording order was listed. And again, we have demographic results. Of course, I didn't present them here today, but there were really no surprising demographic results that we found here. Next slide. I think everyone will be interested to know where you can find more information. This is just touching the surface of the survey. We have a summary report on our website, and we have a data explorer, which I've listed the URL. So please go check this out. We also have 4 peer-reviewed publications that are available. Nothing covering what I just presented on, but we have papers on nutrition. We have a new raw milk paper that just came out, and a paper looking at consumption of raw flour in the United States that may be of interest. So and a methods paper as well. So you can find out a lot more information about the survey by checking out these websites and publications. Next slide. And then this is just a screenshot of our data explorer. And basically it's a really cool app. You can search for any of the questions you're interested in, any of the topics, and the app will output the frequencies and even let you do some bivariate analyses with some chi-square statistics. So please go ahead and check that out. Hope you enjoy it. Next slide. And thank you. And this is me. Yeah, my email, happy to take questions and feel free to email me with additional questions. So thank you so much, Brittany.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate you being here. We've, oh, please go back to the last slide. We've, I think, been briefed on this survey throughout the years. And so your input and sharing of these results is really important to the partnership. I know you have another presentation you're doing soon, but would you happen to have about 4 minutes to take questions?
Yeah, and I saw them popping up, but I couldn't read through them.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I can't multitask.
That's quite all right. I am happy to facilitate for you if you.
That'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Let me just, let's see here. So one question from John here says, can there be consideration to use the term rinse poultry instead of wash in future FDA surveys?
Okay, yeah, that is a good point. We do cognitively test our questions, of course, before going out, but certainly I'll be listening for that. Thank you.
There was another question around, and I was wondering if this was part of the questions that you asked. Michelle states, I've heard of people cleaning raw meat / chicken in the sink with soap before cooking. And was that part of any of the question frameworks?
No, I don't think we really have that information. But that, yeah, I mean, that's interesting to hear. Yeah. I'd be interested if other people have research that share your research with me. I definitely would want to see what that is about. Yes. So yeah, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, if you have more details about your research, yeah, please. I don't know if you can put it in the chat or reach out to me. I'd like to see more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And this is, I think, maybe a common question, and perhaps I'm not sure if it'd be out of the scope of the research, but this an anonymous person is asking, is it possible that the decrease in reported foodborne illnesses was due to people who felt sick only getting tested for COVID and attributing the symptoms to COVID infection instead? So I think they're maybe asking, was it just people weren't reporting illnesses because of COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into too much speculation there. It's a little bit outside of my area, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure all those hypotheses are being considered and probably should follow back with CDC to see what they're saying about this. This is really kind of their area, a little bit more than mine, but certainly a good point about other things going on that would affect the rates. Yeah,
absolutely. No, thank you. I think I was personally surprised about the changes in people not cooking whole chicken or poultry. So that was really interesting for me. Well, Amy, I want to thank you so much for your time. Amy did provide her email address. So if you did have another question, it sounds like you're open to taking them via email. And thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay. Now we'll go to the next section of our programming. We have another poll question for you. We're just curious, so much has changed in the past few years. We'd love to just take a little touch point here to find out, which are the resources that are most helpful for you in your food safety education outreach. And we'll leave this up for 1 minute. And if we missed any resources on this list, feel free to put them in the chat. One-page handouts. Simple. All right, let's see what the results are. Okay, so it looks like brochures, flyers, social media posts, and videos. I imagine someone who put in the chat images that might fall under social media posts as well. Turnkey things and kids activities at 20%. That's really interesting to me. So thank you for doing that. I'm excited to share with you some new resources we have coming up that reflect some of these categories. So we could stop sharing results and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Breaking news today, as a little birthday treat, we have done some work to update some of our coloring pages for kids. And we've also put some, we have them in English and Spanish as well. And really excited. One of my favorite things about this, as you all know, we've become a little bit more digital in our lives, so the tech forward. These are available for download, so you could do a traditional coloring page. You can also color them online. So if you're like myself, where you have young ones in your life, I have tons of nieces and nephews who have their own kid tablet, and I watch them coloring all the time, a digital coloring page on their tablet. This is something that you can share with them. And I would like to show you a little bit about how that would work. We could go to the website to show you. We'll just give this one moment. And I know about 20% said kids activities, but there's always a time to share a kids resource. Just take a moment to get to that web page. And those of you who are using the raise hand function, just a little bit of a note, we will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A box. So please put your notice in one of those functions and we'll be able to answer your question. Here we go. So this is what a page can look like on fightback.org. And our amazing tech guru, Michelle, is going to demonstrate how easy it is to color it in. So please feel free to share this with anyone in your community, your loved ones. We're very excited to offer this. We, as I mentioned before, we have them in English and Spanish as well with prompts on them. Thank you, Michelle. You're doing a really great job. We can go back to the slideshow. So these resources, of course, are available and free of charge for you to access. You feel free to use them. Just as you see, they already have the partnerships logo on them. So if you use them outside of our logo, just mentioning Fight Back or the partnership for food safety education is appropriate credit. So thank you. We've also, our team has redesigned the basic Fight Back brochure. It's available in English and Spanish as well on fightback.org. And it's there to download, free to access, and print. Next slide. And I am so pleased that somebody put images and graphics in the chat box as a resource, because just this March, we launched a stock image library. It is extensive and one of my favorite things. It has about 600 images in it that show proper safe food handling of a variety of practices. So for example, rinsing of produce, using temping either a hamburger or a chicken, It shows hand washing, cleaning of counters. There's also short little video clips that demonstrate this too in action, that you can just plug and play these images in your communications, or if you're a recipe writer and you're making videos, you can edit those into your video without having to film in a kitchen, for example. And all of these images and video clips were designed with feedback from the Health and Food Safety Educator Network around some of the challenges that current stock images offer. So for example, we know that some stock images that you would just find generically online may show a food safety practice, but they might show a rinsing of produce right next to raw protein, for example, because they're not food safety professionals. So these videos and images were designed to just show the absolute correct environment to do these steps, and they're easy to share, and they're there for you to use for free as well. So please use them, share them. There's multiple models to show different skin tones, so please use them. Next slide. And here's an example of some of the images for you. There's, we use the X to show actions on that should not be taken, and then showing you the clear image here of the food thermometer as an example. Next step. And the conference, I believe Harold mentioned this. I'm pleased to share with you that we've just recently opened up registration for next year's Consumer Food Safety Education Conference. It is designed to support people like you, and it's unique because it brings such a diversity of health and food safety educators together. People in cooperative extension, people who work in nutrition education, K through 12, the food industry. It's really unique, and it will be based in Arlington, Virginia. And right now we have a very special rate because we wanted to accommodate all sorts of budget cycles. It's about $100 off the overall rate to attend. So we hope you'll do that. And we'll be opening the abstract submission process soon, hopefully in June, to start developing the programming out. Okay, next slide, please. All right. Perfect timing. I love that when this happens. So right now I'm going to take questions. Unfortunately, we don't have Amy with us any longer because of her commitment. We were so lucky to get her today. So I'll be taking some questions today just about, see what I can answer just about the partnership and the resources. Let's see here. So go ahead and please use the Q&A function to submit your question. And you can also use the chat to put a question in, and someone from our team will be monitoring. I see a question here from Susan. Can these slides, images be used in consumer education programs if credited partnership? Yes, that's, we are here to make consumer education program development 10 times easier for you. So that is what those resources are for. Please use them so you can go and spend your time on making direct connection in your community and with the clients you serve. They're science-based, and you can certainly trust them. And yes, if you credit the Partnership for Food Safety Education or Fight Back or fightback.org, we are happy with that. Thank you for that question. Thank you for your consumer education work, Susan. Let's see. Scrolling down here. Oh, Michelle has asked, wants to know, is there an online version of the 2023 Consumer Food Safety Education Conference? Thank you for that question. We are planning to be in person. We're very excited to get the team back together. We will plan for components of the conference to be virtual, but not the entire platform. Oh, I see that someone else also asked that, and Don too. Okay, I think there's some activity going on in the chat. Any plans for mobile-friendly vector files for social and digital posts? This is something that at the partnership we are really looking strategically at, is how we can position some of these resources in a more mobile-friendly format. The coloring pages in the digital iteration is a step toward that process. There's much more to be done, of course, but something that we've been thinking about internally and talking about is just preparing for the future food handlers, that next generation. And it's a more digital world out there. So how can we be more responsive and show up where people are getting their information in the ways that they're getting their information? So that is definitely of importance at the partnership. Okay, there's a question here. When will abstracts open for the conference? June 1st is our anticipated date. You'll receive email notification from us, and it'll be open most of the summer through August 2nd. So please, if you have any programming that you're working on, especially if you have the ability to do a demonstration of that programming to help teach and inform your peers on how to do that kind of programming in their community, we would love to see that. We'd like this to be an interactive experience. What resources does the partnership have available on the core 4? All those that I just shared. They all line up under the core 4 messages. And one of the reasons why we shared the basic brochure today is because it summarizes those core 4 messages in one place for you. The kids' activity sheets, they'll all roll up under each core 4 element. The safe recipe video style guide images and stock images we shared, those represent different moments of the core 4 as well. So all of these are brand new resources with the same message, because we know that there's not much has changed in that guidance, but the way we can talk about it and deliver that information, there's a new context for that. Okay, I'm scrolling. Oh, Linda has a great question. Recently heard on TV, no longer recommended washing raw poultry before cooking. Is this true? What is the reason? I'm paraphrasing here. So some research from I believe it's the USDA in partnership with the RTI, is exploring the message around cleaning your sinks and sanitizing your sink if you rinse your poultry, because there are some cultural reasons for why people do that. And so that school of thought is, instead of just telling people not to do it, you maybe show them how to sanitize after. Maybe that's the appropriate response. And Shauna, thank you. You included a link to Drexel University's research here on don't wash your chicken. That's another lane to consider, that the partnership is encouraging. We are still encouraging that people do not rinse or wash their poultry. There's so much that happens in that process, and it is so hard to identify points of contamination from that splatter zone. And so, if you do in your community come across someone who's pretty adamant about that, I believe an opportunity is to then maybe provide some helpful guidance on proper sanitation steps and also that splash zone. That's a great question. Okay. Is there a link to the new kids brochures? I believe in the post email, you should get links to all these resources. Well, we have about 4 minutes left, or 3 minutes left now. So I'm going to wrap up the Q&A. Great questions. Thank you all. We could go to the next slide. So I wanted to point out some additional resources for you that are very specific. So we have an e-newsletter that goes out monthly. It's a safe recipe. It's if you're writing recipes for people in your community, or you're a recipe writer yourself, just for fun. It's a great newsletter to sign up for. You will get monthly a new recipe with an image and a fun fact to go with it. And it will include all the safe food handling steps within that recipe. So you don't need to do anything other than either cook it for yourself and enjoy it, or share it with those in your community. We also have another e-newsletter that's called Lasting Lessons, and this is specific for educators. So if you are working with youth, this is a monthly e-newsletter that will call attention to our youth-specific resources and how to use them. Next slide. And you might have heard it's our anniversary, it's our birth date today, and we are in development of creating a cookbook to honor 25 years, and we want your recipes. We want to know what you love to cook, and don't even worry about doing a thing. You can just send us your recipe in raw form, and we'll clean it up for you presentation-wise, and add in the safe food handling steps for you. We just want to highlight this amazing community in this cookbook. So please email us your recipe and photo if you have one. No pressure if you don't, to mysafrecipe@fightback.org. And we also have an incentive going on right now that all recipes sent between now and May 31st will be entered into a random drawing to win a $100 gift card from Blue Bottle. And if you don't know Blue Bottle, you need to look them up because they have the most delicious coffee, and they make great presents for folks too if you're not a coffee person. Next slide. And some other events coming up, because a birthday is not enough. June 7th is World Food Safety Day. And we'll be talking about safe poultry handling, and we'll actually be highlighting some of that research from Drexel University that Shauna put in the chat, recapping and bringing to the front some of our poultry handling specific resources as well, since it's a grilling season and all of that. So please join us. Next slide. And if you love the work of the partnership and you're feeling motivated by us celebrating 25 years, please go to greatnonprofits.org. It takes 3 minutes to leave us a review. This really helps us highlight legitimacy in the work that we are doing if we can get a Great Nonprofits top rated badge. Next slide. Thank you to our contributing partners. Harold called out some of those founding partners, but it is a unique cross-sector collaboration that keeps these resources free of charge to access. And we thank you so much for being part of this work with us and teaming up with our health and food safety educators. Next slide. And just a reminder on how you'll get your CEUs. They've been dropped in the chat box throughout this event. You'll get a follow-up email as well. And in case you miss all of that, just go to fightback.org. And under the free resources tab, you'll find them there. Next slide. And a strong, strong thank you, a big thank you, not only for joining us today, but for being part of this important work to prevent foodborne illness. Happy birthday to you. Happy 25 years. This work cannot be done without you. So thank you for everything you do. And have a great day.